Good evening to you all. Welcome to this eighth and last session of our symposium, and it will be dedicated to highlight the role of women in the field of sports, and if we are to examine the activities and the program of the symposium, most of the participants were men. I am the only female moderator, and as well, my colleague, the researcher, is with us. So, of course, sports, just like several social domains, could be the domain of men, and in order not to say the males, so just like Pierre Bourdieu says, the central vision is there. The practices change, just like the women entered paid labor field. Now we are seeing women in the field of sports, but taking into account the hierarchy and all the fight when it comes to the inequality of wages and the recognition. We are talking about sports in general, not only as a domain. So, as a profession, it is very important. The two presentations will hopefully highlight the presence of women in the field of sports in order to see some aspects of social change. We will see that there are some elements opposing or resisting change, and there are some things that are indeed changing and they are relating to the resources. So please welcome Mr. Hicham Kamouny and Ms. Chaimae Al-Ghazi. Both of them are from Morocco. Hicham Kamouny will talk about the social and cultural engineering of the athlete's body in Morocco, and he is so passionate about sociology and anthropology of the body. I will be introducing him very briefly. Doctoral researcher in sociology and anthropology at the Psychological, Sociological, and Cultural Studies Laboratory at University Sidi Mohammed bin Ali Abdullah in Fes. 20 minutes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all. I would like to thank every person who contributed to the organization of this symposium at the level of the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies for allowing us this opportunity to talk about this important topic. I will be talking about the social and cultural engineering of the athlete's body in Morocco. And here you can notice that I borrowed the concept of engineering from the civil engineering sector. We are based on interviews, on field work, in addition to random sampling of people who practice sports and people who do not practice sport. And based on my question, we would like to understand the athlete's body and its construct as a social and cultural structure, and to what extent we can talk about individuals being capable of achieving social balance. So we counted on observation and interviews in order to get to the deepness of the experience, the human experience, and the field of sports, relying on a socio-anthropological methodology through which we try to understand the body, the athlete's body, by understanding the explanations that are given by groups of people in their sports practices, and also the interaction among each other and in the field of sports, and also their maths and conflicts. Yesterday and today we talked about sports sociology, and I do not have to repeat to talk about this field, but I would like to talk about another science. What about the sports anthropology? So, what about the perception of anthropology of sports? So, when it comes to anthropology, sports was on the sidelines since the 19th century, and there was no elite anthropology in the field of sports focusing on approaching sports. But with the end of the 1950s, an article of John Robertson, Bush, and Alton published an article that was actually a pillar for this new understanding and the creation of this debate regarding the general role of youth and the specific role of sports. I used this article specifically because it contributed to expanding the debate to this new field, considering sports and determining factor when it comes to culture. In general, this study was divided into four categories, and I suggest the different categories based on the fact that the athlete's body in the Arab society specifically is something like when I started working in this research about it, I could not find several references in Arabic, considering that the body is somehow taboo in some aspects. So, this is why this intervention is divided into four categories. We talk about the theoretical aspect, and then in the other parts, we talk about the analysis, and then the conclusion and outcomes. I would like to go back to the sociological production in sports sociology, and I would like to go back to the statistics of Thomas Raymond regarding the sociological production regarding elite. 59.91% was produced in America. When it comes to sports sociology, let me compare them to Asia and Africa. 0.32% in Asia and 0.06 in Africa, which reflects the huge importance given to sports sociology in the United States and UK compared to the quasi absence of these researchers in this part of the world. I would like to tackle the studies highlighting sports body. It was highlighted by an American researcher who talked about normal bodies and how sport as physical activity could be linked with body gesture and different positions and different postures in the society. I would like to focus on the field aspects of the study. I tackled three main concepts. When I went to the field, I wanted to measure this body and thinking about it away from movement. So we are talking about the body of sociology. So we are not talking about the biological aspect of the body, but we are talking also about the anthropological and sociological body of the athlete. So it is not restricted to the biology aspect of it through the wearing, through the cultural aspects. The first part, I relied on the positions of Moroccans and Rabat regarding the athlete's body and the practice of sports. I also focus on the means or mechanisms to build athletes' body, and at the end talked about the bets that individuals achieve when they work on building their athletes' bodies. Of course, we're not talking about the health gains. There are other bets that could be taken into account. So we started by studying and examining the athlete's body by asking a question: what does it represent for you? And especially if we're talking about this socio economic aspect, some people could actually talk about it as a necessary uh, refuge in order to overcome negative vibes and acquire positive vibes that go beyond the psychological problems. The recognition of the society of sports for people who practice sports is the main aspect that led them to use it as a lifestyle and having this cultural or sports culture. This is why participants in this research expressed either in an organized or unorganized way the fact that that was based on a individual decision that was not separated from the social construct and the social reality. We are talking about the importance of the day to day interactions at the level of sports, at the level of the family. And here we can talk about the different positions. For instance, the perception of people towards themselves and their bodies changed because the fact that having people overweight or extremely thin and underweight and the meaning of this representation of the body pushed people to start considering the different meanings of this body and considering the body as an indicator that could be used for others. Being uh, overweight or underweight is actually taken into account. And here we can talk about a challenge to the organic representations and also the social and cultural representation. So, we are talking about the reason driving people to practice sports away from the health benefits, social benefits. I would like to move to the new part in order to talk about the mechanisms leading to building this athlete's body. So, transforming the body from a normal body to an athlete's body. There's a shift from a normal body to another body with specific conditions and by analyzing the physiological aspects of the body and the practices that help achieve this transition. Of course, the gyms actually and their appearance was a turning point for several individuals to think about building the athlete's body. So many of them said that at least they had a membership in a gym or participated in a gym. Some other people did not give it particular attention, but it was clear that it was not the main motivator or incentive for them to do so. Also, there are the gender differences at the level of the society that could be taken into account. So we can ask the question, can we see or tackle the, or can we see women heading towards bodybuilding gyms in the Arab world? So here we can tackle a series of questions and the social representation addressed towards women. So there's a differentiation between the male body and the female body, and maybe this is why the body of the female was set aside or sidelined in several practices. So having the right to move and build the specificities of the body depending on its vision to the universe. I would like to actually talk about these social representations of the bodies of males and female. Some people who participated in the research, they say that the male body is V-shaped and the female body is similar to the soda bottles. So maybe could we talk about a victory here? The sun clock refers also to continuity. So talking about the body as victory V or sand clock on the one hand, and the female body to the defeat. So this is actually a representative of a socio cultural construct that could be taken into account as part of the rhetoric. And I would like to add something very important when it comes to the building of the body. The food culture. Of course, there's a specific diet and food engineering that affects the desired body. So we want a body that is desired, that has a set of conditions, and this body is subject to a specific diet, choosing a set of foods as opposed to others. So having diets focused on vegetables, fruits, juices, meats, white meats, and avoiding other fat food and fast food and fatty foods and bad calories. So this affects the different aspects in terms of the perception of the body. So this actually takes us to athletes of the highest levels competing on tournaments and winning and being victorious. So this takes us to some other aspect, food supplements that increase the body's capacity. So if the normal body offers some sort of performance that we know, with food supplements the body's capacity is bigger, muscles are stronger, and stamina is higher, and competition is bigger. Here we can talk about the doping effect, and doping actually is among the mechanisms that contributed one way or another in this culture to develop this athlete's body, and several participants actually expressed their rejection of these substances because they are built on deception. I have 7 minutes left. I will talk about the core of this study, which is the social bets on the athlete's body. What are the meanings, and how can we explain the practice of athletes, of sports activities, and how we can use these activities. So, do we build the sports body for health purposes, or are there any other reasons? Maurice Merleau-Ponty says the invisible things that we rely on while building our athlete's body. Maybe part of these things we can talk about the bet of health, for instance, during the later or older age. So this actually main mechanism in order to fight illnesses and diseases through a set of exercises that prepare the body and delay the biological appearance of old age, and this actually allows the elderly to announce the spring of the body before the fall of the age. And there's a category that is near a forest in Rabat, but we see the distinction of between people who practice or the elderly people who practice sport from the upper social class as opposed to the lower social classes. And I would like to ask a question: could people who build athlete's body for self-defense, so this takes us to violence and counter-violence, and of course a lot of people are proud of their big muscles and learning martial arts, this could be a potential source for the instigation of violence and rioting. But here I would like to ask a question: could the building of athletes' body for some be a refuge in order for them to lower their violent behavior? In psychology, they link between violence and frustration. Can we say that the violent behavior by some people who actually focus on bodybuilding, especially on the sidelines of the society, so they use it for violence? If the sociological and psychological explanation highlights frustration, so maybe we can talk about social frustration. I do not have a lot of time, but I would like to talk about the showcasing of the body and advertising in social media. So there's a demand, and I would also like to talk about the social body through the rhetoric of the clothes. Roland Barthes says, French philosopher, says that the language of the wear of the clothes is a language that is known by different people, like choosing tight uh, clothes and specific brands reflects some sort of social class and belonging to a class in society. Also, among the shifts, we can talk about the shift from the real to the virtual. The promotion became virtual, digital, creating accounts on social media in order to market and promote this body. I will jump to the results of this study. Among the most important outcomes and conclusions, I would like to say that sports is an important source of meaning given by people to their daily activities. So the criteria of, or the criterion of practicing sports and not practicing sports is not the only criterion, but also the different aspects that were highlighted. Why do they exercise? Why don't they exercise? And how can the other elements affect the social status? Athlete's body does not stop at the level of the health aspect, the biological aspect, and the psychological aspects. There are also implicit and invisible requirements to include self defense, delaying old age, and also the way that they represent themselves, and this shows the different aspects of the body. So these bets are actually implicit, and many people count on them based on the research that I have done. Just two conclusions. The first one is the fact that building the athlete body represents the different aspect, and my colleague Chaimae is going to talk about the women contribution in this aspect. So here we can highlight the aspects of social exclusion and marginalization, and the distinction based on race. People of color are still suffering from racism in this regard as well. The last conclusion is that the shift towards the digital world was one of the most important transformations. The private, personal body no longer is, it has become public, and it has become advertised and promoted, and it has become part of the social media environment that actually seeks financial reward and materialistic recognition. So we need to take into account these new shifts in the digital world. It is a new reality. Thank you so much. Thank you. In order to respect the time, I will move to Dr. Chaimae Al-Ghazi, and then we will take whatever questions we have. Chaimae Al-Ghazi is going to tell us about female women athletes in Morocco. Of what gender identity may we speak? She is a doctoral researcher on the research team for political and constitutional performance at Université Mohammed V in Morocco. She earned her master's in constitutional law and political science. 20 minutes, please. Good evening. I would like to thank the chair, Ms. Raouda, and I would like to thank you all for participating with us. And I see some women among us, and it makes me very happy because my intervention, I think it will be important for them, not to exclude men, but based on this sports experience about the women that I will be talking about in this intervention, we will see that we need to shed light on this topic and give particular attention to allowing women access to sports and also the follow up and the sports experiment. The question that could be asked: why are you a researcher in political and constitutional law and you are moving to the sociology and anthropology of the body and feminist issues? I have self motivation because when I started working about on sports and I saw the different themes to include sports and gender, I had a question: why not study this field? Although my field of specialty was different, but I think that a good researcher needs to be capable of moving between different fields in order for the researcher to expand human knowledge. We can talk about female athletes in Morocco and the gender identity. So you could ask why the body. So the topic of my paper that I would like to publish is about the experience of the body for women. It is very important, in addition to other aspects that concern women in sports, or the division of labor and the field of sports, or the salary, etc. But I think that the body experience is very important because talking about the body of athlete women serves the analysis of predetermined ideas based on historical construct that is framing the role of women, especially if we focus on the sports field. We need to recognize that the gender criteria includes some contradiction between the aesthetic aspect of the body and the traditions that are inherited. This is why sports has become an important section of the study of the body and the perception of the others and the self-perception of the body. This is why we see this intersection between sports and body, and it is also an intersection between sports and the body, and this is why we can talk about the gender identity. The feminist studies established a clear distinction between the biological differences, so talking about female versus male, and the differences relating to social constructs that take us towards uh, gender identification of men versus women. Simone de Beauvoir talked about this in her book. We are not born women, but we become women by complying with the previously constructed female gender role. So, based on the body and building the body and the sports field, so we can ask the question, women joining sports, does it lead to stereotyping of the body of the woman? The woman can build her body in a way that is not in line with what is expected from women that do not practice sport. And can we consider sports the best means to put an end to these gender disparities, or sports uh, are on the other end of this discussion? In order to delve in the depth of this topic, we carried out a field study and we focused on the experience of women athletes in Morocco, case studies of professional women athletes based on sample of 12 practitioners from different sport fields that require strong physical effort like football, basketball, handball, bodybuilding, kickboxing, and mountain climbing. The sample was distributed 21 to 52 years of age, which is something positive, in order to have a detailed overview of the sports experience until we reach the older age. We noticed that or we focused on interview, and we used different locations and different mediums, and I could carry out two interviews in Ibn Sina Park in Rabat and in a cafe in Arfan in Rabat as well. As to the remaining interviews, I was not capable of meeting them in person. This is why I used WhatsApp to contact them, because they told me that their training prevents them from moving to the city that I was in. I do not consider it an excuse, because I was capable of moving to their cities, but given the short time I had to finish the paper, I could not move throughout the cities. We are talking about women all over the Kingdom of Morocco. We have Casablanca, Rabat, Douar, and Marrakesh. So moving between these cities would have been somehow difficult. I can say that these interviews lasted approximately 30 minutes based on guidelines that were previously prepared. I was taking into account my personal remarks, and I focused on socio-anthropological methodology regarding the relation between the athlete woman and her body, and how she evaluates her experience, and the relation between the female body and the gender belonging. We focused on women athletes in Morocco because, based on the position of women sports in Morocco compared to the men sports in terms of organization, practice, and social representation, it is not a de facto situation. It is not given. There's a discussion as to how ready Moroccan families are to push women to participate in sports, and openness towards the presence of women in fields that are traditionally not theirs. Morocco 3 months ago hosted the African Cup for women, with an important participation of the national team, national women's team, and they were capable of reaching the finals. This event was actually well received by the fans of Morocco. There was a huge encouragement, but despite all that, we could see some comments after they failed to win the tournament. So there were some negative uh, criticism addressed to women participating in sports and saying that they need to go back to the kitchen, unfortunately. First of all, in order to uh, talk about this topic in detail, I will be talking about the theories that I relied on with some cases not from Morocco but also from outside Morocco but in the same context, and also talking about specific elements relating to the biological aspects of female body before moving to focusing on women athletes in Morocco.
We said the biological aspect is not what creates the gender discrimination, but going back what Pierre Bourdieu talked about in his book when he said that the social world builds the body, and in the first place this relies on the body and its biological reality, and this is based on a mythical relationship between the two genders to do with the division of labor between the female body and the male body, and also when it comes to biological, and this sounds like the natural justification for the biological division through focusing on some physiological characteristics of a woman's body, which needs to breaking some taboos. Like, for example, when we talk about the menstrual cycle, this is surrounded by a number of questions, and some consider it the reason for the lack of ability by women athletes to perform in an appropriate and to be up to the highest standards. So therefore these physiological components make some think of a woman's body as a weak one, a body which was created to be in a certain physique or shape, and a body that faces some certain difficulties like the periods of the menstrual cycle, the pregnancy, giving birth, etc., postnatal periods, which makes the woman's body unable to face up to the challenges demanded by sporting activity. What hinders women's performance is when people keep silent vis-a-vis these hormonal changes by the sports associations who ignore these aspects. For example, the Chinese swimmer, I will not be able to pronounce Fuyu Hanhe, backstroke swimmer who achieved records and broke records. But when she was asked why she came fourth in the Rio de Janeiro Summer Olympics, she said she felt tired because her period was a few days earlier than the day of the competition. We say that we should know. I'm not saying that women should be absolved of taking part in sporting activities or competition at certain periods of their life, but what I'm saying, some women can go through difficulties, hormonal difficulties, for example, because of the disruption in their menstrual cycles or the type of the diet they follow. Presuppositions that women cannot perform wonderfully, we find this justification we find always refuted through certain cases. The case which is always under the spotlight, and this has been recently since 2008 until the end of 2019. This is the case of Semenya Casta, the South African athlete who managed to break records at the level, at the international level in running, but she appeared in a certain shape that the followers of the sport and sport authorities found that she looked unlike a typical woman's body, so therefore she broke the stereotype images of women. So therefore they forced her into a femininity test, which is done by the Olympic Committee since the 1930s, and to determine whether the athlete is male or female, because her body was stigmatizing her in a way. This runner, as the result of her test was negative, or she was proven to be male so far as performance concerned, so therefore were asked to follow a certain protocol to maintain the hormonal balance, but she refused that because she considers herself as female and not male, and she's saying that her body is not the mirror that reflects her gender. There are many elements I want to talk about, but I'm very sorry. I wanted to take more time. I'll move to the practical aspect and the interviews I have conducted. These interviews were aimed at posing certain questions on the physical experiences. I asked them, are you happy with your body in this shape? Do you consider this body to be compatible with the standards and the criteria that you keep listening to from men and women? The responses said that these women are happy with their bodies and they are cause for envy by other women. But when I used to ask them, do they hear comments from here and or derogatory remarks, these ladies did say that they really hear this kind of from in Moroccan dialect they say Azr Douar, which means a girl who ignores her femininity, or she's like a tomboy. She wears attires more suited to men than real women. Ahmed, they told us that they hear these expressions or derogatory remarks which stigmatize them in a way. And there were some women who were not engaged in practicing sports accuse these athletes that they will never get married because of engaging in sporting activity. One lady told me that when she attended family occasions and weddings, they used to tell them that give up sport, put on some weight, that way you will be more attractive because sport will not benefit you. Look at your peers, they're all housewives with husbands and children. Also, when I asked them, why are you criticized this way? Is it because of you wear the kind of clothes that's different to other women who are not engaged in sport, or you carry out activities outside the realm of sport, you're engaged in sort of behavior which is outside the social norms? They told me that never, absolutely not. They deny that they can never attempt to be similar to men. Once they leave the gym or the sporting venue, they go back to their normal state of mind of being a woman. And this brings me back to the Judith Butler theory on gender performance, which says that there is no male or female entity in nature, but there is that being which is prepared to be male or female, emanating from social performances and social conditioning and the social disciplines imposed by society. So therefore, this affirmation that these women do not want to look like males, and they celebrate their femininity, and they do not want to be masculine in any way. They worry about being discriminated on the fact that they imitate men and they look like men, or they're tomboys. So therefore, this dichotomy of this is a man or that's a woman. I have to conclude. My final conclusion through this field study, which I will try through the questions and answers to expand even more, that women athletes, despite them engaging in sporting activity, they still repeat some kind of a strategy which is oscillating between with the fact that they consider themselves women and what is masculine from the requirements of the sporting activity, which requires training, strength, and training and competitiveness. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chaimae. Thank you, Hicham. I want to take 30 seconds only to pose a question to you and a comment on what Chaimae said. Then I'll open the floor for your questions and answers. and the social media questions, and we'll try to pose them. Hicham, I really wished to understand more to the sample you used, the sample you studied about were they professionals, amateurs, well, and what about their gender, and this made it a bit difficult for me to understand the conclusions of the study. The first question, why the word body in singular form and not bodies, as if there is only one kind of body, and also the title of the session uh, in Arabic, women and sport rather than women in the plural. So why the word body? Is it according to certain criteria, or we live in an age where the youth express themselves all the time through the social media? And also, is this to do with the status of sport, which is a symbol of success now? I wanted you to talk about this indirect success which is achieved through professionalism in sport, and also the question of diets and proteins and bodybuilding and how this is done. And also what you said about David Loproto and the relationship between sport and health and youth fountain, if we can call it that. Chaimae, thank you for this clarity in vision and this clarity in your presentation. The question of taking women outside the scope of sport, this is not due to giving women having the physical strength and the muscles, and this is due to men have the strength, mathematics, etc., and women have the emotions and the weakness. Judith Bulgar is the only Hungarian was the world champion in chess. She was considered an exception. Judith Bulgar had the ability to play other players without seeing them over the phone, and she beat many world champions. So thank you both. Now we open the floor for questions. Please state your name and your affiliation. Nadim Nasif from Lebanon. I work in physical policy and sport management. I have two questions. First to Hicham. You gave us statistics about sports sociology in England and America. Can you please repeat the numbers to know what is the percentage of research conducted in North America and compared to the Arab world and Africa? Chaimae, excellent presentation. Have you done anything by way of comparison with Europe? There are many things in Europe since in the last 30 years the cycling champions came to interview when the Tour de France was there. The French champion told her afterwards that He told her that he said to her that there are sports for men and sports for women, and it took many years that women's cycling events were broadcast on television. If you make comparative studies, maybe you can forecast where are we heading in the Arab world after 10, 20 years. I followed the match with. I think in the last 10 years, women's football has developed a lot, but until now it's very problematic for women. I used to train the Lebanese national team for girls. If you study the cases of other countries, you can make forecasts for the future. Thank you. Thank you both. We are happy that we stayed to the last session. Very nice things we listened to in the final session. Also, to place women and sport to the last session, maybe something we can think again, but it was very exciting. I'm excited that I stayed to the end. You, as a researcher, I'm talking on the methodological side, you interviewed people with your hijab, wearing the hijab. How was the relationship between you and during the interview with the women athletes? Maybe you were imposing a certain image of what is the ideal body in the Arab and Muslim. Maybe you had some sort of a symbolic power on the other, and in the interviews maybe the other would try to position themselves away from the interviews, and with you, a researcher. Thank you very much. My name is Chaimae Yusuf from the Arab Center. I thank Hicham and Chaimae for this very exciting interventions. I have a question to Mr. Hicham first. Maybe it's customary in the literature when it comes to the body was rarely an individual thing. It was more like something which belongs to the social. You do not do with your body what you like. You're always under the influence of certain paradigms in a central way, maybe because of the religious influence or new liberal influence. My question is, can we consider today the athletic body, that an athlete's body, when it comes to weights and calories, etc., that a human being can do what they want from their bodies, where using Michel Foucault's description that in a new liberal sense we cannot talk about liberalizing or liberating the body. My question to Hicham, women are not excluded by and large because of their bodies or certain colors. The exclusion, marginalization depends on the cultural thing. For example, Women wearing the hijab can be marginalized in certain contexts. Women athletes can be marginalized in certain contexts. During your interviews, if you interviewed women outside the realm of sport, have you felt this or not? Secondly, women now participate in sports, but there are people who hold the reins of sports are mainly males, and we know in the United States, for example, only recently that women footballers started receiving similar wages or equal wages to men, although their performance was better. So this, of course, brings us to the question of who is in charge and who is in authority. Okay, we stop here. The first part of this round, we give you a chance to respond. Thank you very much for these questions. I think the most important thing is for us to come out. We don't have to come out with answers, but maybe we should come out with the questions to do with men. Yusuf Zaidan, when his daughter asked him that, he said, ask me, daughter, human beings are questions and not answers. Regarding the sample, I didn't have enough time to go into the details. In the random sample, there were some 15 people who are practice or some who don't. The division was 7 females and 8 males, and I asked for the question why the word body in singular. I used this title because I wanted to know the contribution of one individual, one person, and the meaning through which he or she would express themselves, and maybe this is a conclusion. I'm not ultimately, I will not talking about one body, one single body, but about bodies, especially when we move to the from reality to another dimension. When, for example, the media, the symbolism, when the body is a symbol for power or beauty aesthetically, or from point of view of fashion or some sexual products, etc. When my departure point was using the world in the singular and through social engineering concepts, that we start talking as about a body and how it was dealt with in social studies. This, I think, started in the 1960s when this interest in the body, then later on with other realms of interests developed, like, for example, like to demonstrate, illustrate, and be the source of pride, marketing through the social media. Food supplements, for example, if this sports body does important things in competitions and championships, we say, why do we use food supplements? Doesn't this mean that there is a culture of food to enhance the ability to compete, this body's ability to perform better? So this will be at the expense of the health of this body, but this will expedite the ability and the speed with which it can achieve um, better results in competitions. Thomas Raymond talked about the statistics when he asked about the presence of the how this eye of sociology looks at the body of the athlete or sports person. I think I did not. He conducted statistics at the world level, but in North America, 59%, 91% of the products was sociological products on sport. 18% in Western Europe. I took two examples from Europe and North America. I want to take some example from Asia. Uh, Over 37% in Africa is 0.0 something. The sociological production was focusing on the body, and this gives you an idea. And I'd like to tell you that in the peer reviews, I don't know who did that. One of the points that I was told by why didn't you use Arabic references? I face a problem. Where can I get them? I'm not denying their existence, but I didn't know how to get them because I did not use not even one single reference in Arabic for this study. Also, I say that not only the sports, the athlete sport, but the question of a human body in general, with these changes, the question is not that the body is individual. As our bodies are no longer an individual issue; they are more of a public thing through the digitization process. And now, for example, now we document our physical activities in the social media, and also there are channels to market this. Isn't this a kind of admission socially? For example, during the pandemic, when we forced to stay indoors, our bodies were consumed and a lot of work was done because of the house arrests we all had to go through. Many athletes started channels on YouTube or their personal accounts for the purpose of practicing their sporting activities and building their body. So therefore, this body moved to this realm, and it was marketed, maybe not necessarily to make any financial gains, but it was to gain some sort of a recognition. For example, you can work on your body and nobody can pay attention, but if you use videos and images through the social media, this will move from the unknown to the known. Maybe these are the most. Now we give the floor to Ms. Chaimae. Thank you very much for your questions. I hope that there'll be more questions, and I hope that women will take part in reaction with with what Mr. Raouda said, to also saying that women exclusion from sports is due to the intellectual weakness, as some people say, and not necessarily physical. This is not based on any theoretical grounding, but I remember here you said the chess player was considered an exception in the field of world championship. This lady, uh, Queen's Gambit, which tells the story of a small girl who used to live in an orphanage. She was a genius in chess and she managed to. This was during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, and because she was American by nationality, the film did a wonderful job in presenting this girl's life story despite her some psychological problems, and she made it to the top, and she went to Russia and faced one of the giants of the game and beat him. So therefore she may have broken that myth that women is weak intellectually, not only in sports, also the idea of women is weak intellectually. We find that even in academia, this is a fact in our societies. Unfortunately, we still do not see the women as presence. Take me for example, or you shouldn't. I'm the only woman participant in this symposium, and this alleged false idea of women's weakness intellectually is Billie Jean King when she beat Bobby Riggs in 1973, and this also broke another myth, blew another myth, and on the physical side, and this was made into a film in 2017, Battle of the Sexes, or Battle of the Battle of the Sexes. This alleged idea, whether to do with women's weakness intellectually or physically, is refuted continuously, and the lack of prominent women in the intellectual field is not because they are of lesser ability, but maybe they do not get the same opportunities or education which enables them. We know that there are problems for rural girls in villages face, and other problems. So far as what Dr. Nadim Nasif, thank you for your question. I have not made a comparison with women in Europe or the United States because I wanted it to be a field study, meet women athletes, professional athletes, so therefore there was no room to make the comparison, but I cannot deny that the framing of the whole thing always made me meet or collide with women who have been discriminated against. Semenia Castor is one example I focused on, because why women should be subjected to a femininity test, and why don't make the men also? Why not? If this is a chromosome XX or XY, why men are not subjected to the same test? This femininity test poses, because what about transgenders? What if people who change from man to woman? Should we subject them to the same classification, or the testing will be considered a man or a woman? For example, will he be engaging in a women's sporting game or activity, or men's sporting activity? This creates lots of problems. So far as I'm concerned, in my personal opinion, that should be wiped out completely, that subjecting women to physical, and we should take sport as the realm to show real performance and not to talk about man, woman, male, female. Mr. Mahfouz asked me about my relationship because I wear the hijab. I think most of these women were wearing the hijab anyway, and when I used to conduct the interviews, I used to conduct them this interviews in their houses. So this was inside the house, so nobody needed to wear their hijab. And because I was a PhD student and my time didn't allow me to meet them except in their homes or at my place, to have better surroundings and more quiet atmosphere, etc. And I met them on personal basis, and some, when I asked them about their hijab and whether does it hinder their sporting abilities, they said no, not at all. It did not hinder their ability because they wear modest attires, long sleeves, long trousers, etc. So they do not allow this kind of stigmatization. The last question was by Mr. Yusuf, if I remember the name rightly. Said the sports realm is really conducive to discrimination against women. Yes, this is true. Not every environment is conducive to accepting women. Morocco is not one of the countries which bans sporting activity or discriminates at the level of allowing women to engage in sporting activities. It's not done in Morocco. Women can engage in sports and be professional. What I talked about this, I did not discuss this from the point of view of allowing women, because this is there and there is no problem in this at all. All women can engage and enter into this field. Most women who I interviewed told me that they started at a young age, they joined clubs and they worked their way up the ladder. My point of departure was the body, and when they become professional sports, they are talked to and talked about differently, and everything will be focused on they start telling them you're not married yet because look at your body, look at your cousins, look at etc. Men prefer a certain kind of women's bodies, etc. This kind of talk dissuades women, really. For example, when they want to move to other cities and they want to, for example, reside in decent hotels, they always told that what do you want? So what you're doing, do go and do what you want to do in sport. This is like a form of discrimination. Opportunities are not equal to men and women. Why don't they have the same logistics, the same level of accommodation, transportation? And if women athletes can reach world level, for example, if we need that level, we need to focus on this. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that in Imran we received two papers by women. One paper we had difficulties with, the other paper was by Chaimae. There she is. As for we left women to the last because we leave the best till last. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chaimae, and thank you, Hicham. I just want to conclude by the mechanisms of exclusion in sport. We must not forget the question of resources. Maybe we did not talk about the harassment aspect and other aspects of behavior, but sports remains as one realm. We finish this session, but we give Dr. Mouldi, he will give us his closing remarks for this symposium. Thank you. Thank you very much. After 2 marathon days, everybody is tired, and maybe somebody say, if this man finishes everything quickly, I say thank you very much and we can go home, but I have to do this protocol. First of all, I want to thank the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies for organizing this symposium, and I want to thank the panelists, the lady and gentlemen of our panelists, the efforts they made, and I want to thank the technicians and the staff of the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies who took care of the logistical sides in a very short time. This is not an easy task when it comes to obtaining entry visas and other arrangements. I want to thank our interpreters who exerted a lot of efforts. We do not feel their presence sometimes, but they are there doing simultaneous interpretation. Sometimes we go with a very rapid speed. We don't take them into consideration. Thank you to them too. My job is to close. Closing is like another opening of new horizons. So therefore, this is my job. I'll be very brief by highlighting what we talked about and what we did not talk about. This will be one of the important lessons, and reflective sociology does not necessarily mean talking about the conditions of thinking, but the special conditions and circumstances for every individual researcher in dealing with the subject. So on this basis, My question was, have we been influenced and impacted by the political and cultural context and of the event of the World Cup finals in Qatar when we discuss these matters? Has this been present in our thinking, and has this made us avoid certain questions and focus on others? What were the themes that took the forefront of our interest in this particular context, and what are the dark spots that we have not highlighted or did not shed light on because we did not see them or pose the right questions which maybe should have been posed but we did not, and maybe we did not even see the importance of doing that. In other words, we pushed them aside because we stuck to the context of the question itself. If you notice that most of the introductions were on sports policy as the element to produce soft power. This was one of the questions. Sport as a space which is torn between normalization or rejection of normalization. Sports and the World Cup in Football World Cup as a tool to achieve presence in the world and the presence of Qatar as a country and the civilizational belongings which calls into question the question of identity, which was said to be Arab and Muslim identity, the investment, economic investment, also sports as people who use the football stadium to express their absence. They want some visibility and overcome their marginalization, and sometimes this is manifests itself in violent behavior or symbolic violence in their social circles. Sports as a field which can generate movements which can go trans-border movements. Also, sports as a cultural activity which can blow up myths or break taboos like gender symbolisms and others, sometimes which are negatively derogatory nature, like what Chaimae said about women. If we link this themes with the context of the World Cup FIFA finals in Qatar, we were trying as individuals or organizations to respond the questions about the state of Qatar, and that is how can we use the opportunity of the FIFA World Cup finals to raise the profile of Qatar and Arabs in the world. How can we benefit from this to develop investments and attract investments and compete with that at the regional level? What will happen in the stadiums? Will there be violence or not? And how should we behave vis-a-vis the fans if they behave in a way contrary to our social norms and traditions? There is a hidden question. What if, for example, they come from Israel or other countries using twisted ways and means? Above all papers almost focused on football, which is World Cup. Sports is not just football, of course. There are three questions which we did not focus on with different proportions from the questions asked by the state of Qatar. The first one is sports and religion, which got away. We've slipped through our fingers. Secondly, sports and gender. The third question was sports and integration, and this is something not settled. These are the questions that got away. We did not manage to tackle them. Of course, so this is faced with the number of questions that we did tackle, and in the context of the World Cup finals, there is something that we did not see in most sporting activities, that when Western modernization or modernity knocked on our door, we gave them up, once at the level of practice and once at the level of thinking. There was no paper which described to us or study made an ethnological or anthropological points of view. The kind of sporting activities which were at the forefront, then they were marginalized. We didn't see any papers in that. The second phenomena is that the second issue is the sporting phenomena is a comprehensive one, totalitarian in nature. It's not inclusive to football. We did not have, for example, papers on gymnastics when the body changes, and just keeping silent vis-a-vis this theme, which is very weak in the Arab world. In my generation, we are amazed by Nadia Comaneci, for example, but in the Arab world we do not have this, and this reflected our thinking. We did not pose this question. This question got away from the scale of our priorities, although sports is more comprehensive. We did not get any papers on volleyball or handball or individual games like tennis, for example. Uns Jaber, for example, a Tunisian tennis player, and achieving success at the individual level. Everything focused on football, ultras, economy, etc. Also, the papers did not delve into the spectators, not necessarily football fans, but who goes, how many of us go to the stadium. The ones who don't go, what's their story? Why don't they? What are their relationships with sport and engaging in sporting activity? What's their position in the social fabric of our society? Is it just rich people who attend football matches? Or handball or volleyball? Do they? And if they don't, why? What kind of sports do they go to watch? Is this old? Is this new in the history of societies? No context was, no contextualization was given. We did not have any papers studying moving from old allegiances to new allegiances. For example, what happened to the Sufi orders? Have they given up their Sufi orders and joined sports clubs? Have they become members of sports clubs, for example? The old frameworks of the social integration that we're talking about, people used to go to other, for example, Sufi orders and others. Is there are there audiences or spectators who change their allegiances? Are they ultra similar to these groups of people? We did not think of these questions. I can continue, but exposing certain points, certain spots that we did not highlight. In my opinion, this is because of the context that we're living. We thought ultras, football, and raising the flag of Qatar, etc. That this is what we should talk about, whereas the phenomena is much wider than that and more complex than that, and there's a linkage between the past and the present that we did not delve into. There are other areas that we did not shed light on, but in any event, from the theoretical point of view, in my opinion, so far as the papers which came close to anthropology, this morning we heard some, did not work on engaging in a dialogue with the theories which studied Arab societies and try to engage and interact with them to find answers for new questions. When we talked about Waterbury, when we talked about Morocco, it's only because our friend in the morning talked about the vast number of football associations. What does this mean? And like what Dr. Haider said in the opening, this is relatively a new theme in the Arab countries. And the role of this symposium is to really provide incentives for those who are present here or followed us over the social media to engage in this kind of questions and add something at the local level and the global level. I hope that this will happen, and God bless you all. Thank you.